So today's Mental Health Awareness Day, and that's a day that's become really incredibly important to me. I have a lot of really good friends and family whose lives have been touched by illnesses such as depression, anxiety, ADD, ADHD, borderline personality, PTSD, bipolar, just so many different mental illnesses that are out there. And while they all have some sort of a genetic component, like research shows that what we think of as mental illnesses are actually brain disorders. So in MRIs, you can actually really see this, where a depressed brain looks different from an anxious brain, looks different than a bipolar brain, looks different than an ADHD brain, and all of those brains look different than what we would consider to be a normal or healthy brain. They're not all activated unless some or until a traumatic event occurs. Although some are they just spontaneously happen. So over the years, I've come to think of these people, these friends that I have, as wounded birds, people who are made perfectly in God's image, but are hampered in their ability to really fly to their true potential. So like all wounded birds, medication and proper treatment are necessary to returning to a full and fulfilling life. And to me, that's really hopeful for my friends who have mental illnesses. So here's the part where I get super courageous. 12 months ago, I joined roughly 3% of the population when I was diagnosed with bipolar 2. So what this means is that my highs and lows are more extreme than others. So I don't just get sad, I get depressed. My happy moods, they're weird. So my highs, I can get really super irritable, which is actually normal for somebody who has bipolar. Even though that doesn't seem like that's something that should happen when you are happy, being hypomanic or manic doesn't necessarily mean that you feel good. Although I also get like really elated feelings of just, it feels awesome sometimes. But it also comes with like other symptoms like difficulty managing money, some pretty extreme risk taking, really, really bad insomnia, and other things that come with it too. So I've been really lucky. I have been super lucky. I have not used addiction to cope for my bipolar, which is really super common. And not just with bipolar, but with depression, anxiety, and other things. Addiction is just a really common way of coping with those mental illnesses. And I also got really lucky that somehow along the way, I learned good enough coping skills that I avoided detection until a year ago when I was actively seeking out help for a pretty severe depression that I was in. I'd gone from a high functioning depression to just a really ugly one. So the problem though is that good enough coping skills don't mean good. And so as a result, I've had a lot of trauma in my life. And much of it has come from, just putting myself in really risky situations. And to me, they never felt risky. To everybody else, they looked at that and they said, "What are you doing? This is insane. This is not a good idea." And I would be like, "What? This isn't a big deal. I can totally handle it." And I felt really safe until, it just, what you might expect happened and things went ugly. And I was always a little bit surprised by it because it really did not feel like a risky situation to me. So the awesome part of getting a diagnosis is actually it's two parts. So one, it means I have a path forward, which I'm so thrilled about. But two, it released a lot of shame. And this is something that people don't always understand, but I can look back on all the events I've had in my life and how I've responded to those. And now I have an explanation for it. It hasn't all been, I haven't been trying hard enough. It hasn't all been that I'm just not getting with the program, that I'm not just getting over myself. It's literally been my brain has not been letting me cope or function in a healthy way. And it just takes a lot of that shame out. I'm still responsible for some of the things that I did. I'm still responsible for the responses, but at least now I have an explanation for it and I can understand it and I can move forward in a different way. So through medication, a lot of therapy and a lot of therapy classes and a lot of prayer, I'm in a much, much better place than I have ever been before in my life. And God has, and He continues to walk with me every step of the way. And as I've gone through this journey, God has called me to a new purpose, which is kind of what this video really is about all today. So I've been ministering to others with mental illnesses And this ministry is really growing, and it's taking shape in ways that, I never imagined. I just thought I was going to just lead this little small group. And it's just, I just suddenly started feeling pressure to do more and to do more and to do more. And each one of those steps was just so little. And now I look at it and I go, whoa, this is becoming something fairly big. So every Wednesday night, I lead a support group. And that support group delivers messages of God's grace and practical tips for the recovery process. So it's not just reading a Bible, it's really looking in and saying, what are some thinking traps or thinking distortions that we tend to fall into? What are some ways to build joy into our everyday lives? Because joy is something that a lot of people with like depression miss out on. So it's really also applying those practical tips and sharing those with people. I also, every so often I lead a secondary group. Those take deeper dives into healing from trauma and really helping people find their significance and their importance in this world. Again, when you're talking about people who live with mental illnesses, a lot of times they feel like they're a burden to other people and they don't want to ask for help, or they don't want to put themselves out there because they don't want to be a drag on anybody else. And we need to know what our significance is in this world, what how important we are. That's really encouraging for us. So that's another group that I lead. So beyond that, I've just felt more pressure to do more. So now there's a website, there's a Facebook presence with a Facebook page and a Facebook group. We're up on Twitter, and there's a YouTube channel. So I even have a book in the works. So everything that this ministry is about is 3 ideas. It's all about education, it's all about encouragement, and it's all about support. So as much as this is an announcement today, this is also an invitation and really a request, an ask. I ask you to share these resources with people. Anyone you know who's living with chronic or trauma-induced mental illnesses. We live with a physical illness in the same way that diabetes and cancer are physical, so is mental illness. Those are invisible, so is mental illness. When somebody has diabetes and cancer, we tell them, take your insulin, take your chemotherapy, do what you need to do to get better. And it's the same thing with mental illness. It's not just about taking medicine, though, because it's also about taking care of our bodies. Through all the self-care. So please, 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 we know that there may not be a cure for mental illness. We do know that remission is possible, and relapses become less frequent as we learn more about how to manage our symptoms, just like with somebody with cancer, just like with somebody who has diabetes. It may come back, especially with cancer. We may have a relapse. The cancer may return. But at least we know we've done everything we can to minimize that opportunity, right? So here it is, Wounded Birds Ministry, and reaching out to everyone made perfectly in God's so nervous. So reaching out to everyone made perfectly in God's image and working hard to fly again. I really do hope that you share this with others. I think that there's a lot of hope that we can bring to people, and I would just love that. It's not about me, it's about the message. Hope. There's hope, and we can move forward. Anyway, thank you so much for your time today. Love you guys.